The rain hammered against the tall glass windows of First National Bank in downtown Manhattan, creating rivers that streaked down the pristine surface like tears. Inside, the marble floors gleamed under fluorescent lights, and the air carried that distinct smell of old money and new leather. It was a Tuesday morning in October, and the bank was experiencing its usual pre-lunch rush of well-dressed professionals and hurried business people. Marcus Hayes stood near the entrance, water dripping from his worn jacket onto the polished floor. He was a tall man in his late 50s, with silver-streaked hair that hadn't seen a proper cut in months, and a face weathered by years of experience most people couldn't imagine. His jeans were faded, his sneakers had seen better days, and the backpack slung over his shoulder looked like it had traveled through every continent twice. To anyone glancing his way, he appeared to be just another person seeking shelter from the storm. Perhaps homeless, certainly not someone who belonged in one of Manhattan's most prestigious financial institutions. Marcus approached the information desk where a young woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and a navy blazer sat typing on her computer. She looked up briefly, her smile faltering when she took in his appearance. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone polite but guarded. "I need to speak with someone about accessing my account," Marcus said, his voice calm and measured. "I've been traveling abroad for several years and I need to make some arrangements." The receptionist's eyes swept over him again, lingering on the water pooling at his feet. "Do you have an account with us?" "I do. Under Marcus Hayes." She typed something into her computer, her perfectly manicured nails clicking against the keyboard. After a moment, she frowned. "I'm not seeing anything under that name in our active accounts. Are you sure you have an account here?" "I'm certain. It's been inactive for a while, but it should still be there." Before we continue with Marcus's story, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching this from right now? Drop your country or city in the comments below. I love seeing where our community is tuning in from all around the world. And if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We share incredible stories like this one every week. Stories that will make you think, feel, and see the world differently. You won't want to miss what's coming next. The receptionist pursed her lips. "Sir, if the account isn't showing up in our system, you'll need to speak with a manager." "But I have to tell you, our managers are very busy today, and they typically handle accounts for our premium clients." The implication was clear in her tone. "I understand. I'm willing to wait." She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, then picked up her phone. After a brief, hushed conversation, she hung up and gestured toward the seating area. "Someone will be with you shortly. Please wait over there." Marcus nodded and made his way to the leather chairs near the windows. He could feel eyes on him, the subtle shifts of other customers moving their expensive bags a little closer, the security guard near the door adjusting his position to keep Marcus in his line of sight. He'd experienced this countless times over the past few years, and it no longer bothered him. In fact, it had become a fascinating study in human nature, how quickly people judged based on appearances, how readily they assigned value to others based on the clothes they wore or the bags they carried. 20 minutes passed. Marcus watched the rain outside, observed the hurried dance of umbrellas on the sidewalk, the yellow cabs splashing through puddles. He noticed a young mother struggling with a stroller and groceries, and smiled when a stranger stopped to help her. Small acts of kindness in a city that often seemed too busy to care. "Sir?" A sharp voice cut through his thoughts. Marcus turned to see a man in his early 40s approaching, his expression a mixture of impatience and barely concealed annoyance. His suit was expensive, his tie perfectly knotted, his shoes polished to a mirror shine. The name tag on his lapel read, Gerald Blackwood, Senior Branch Manager. "I'm Gerald Blackwood. I understand you're having some issue with an account?" He didn't extend his hand for a shake, didn't sit down, just stood there with his arms crossed, clearly expecting this to be a quick conversation. Marcus stood, meeting his eyes. "Yes, I've been out of the country for several years, and I need to access my account. The receptionist couldn't find it in your system." Gerald's eyes swept over Marcus with undisguised disdain. "What's the account number?" "I don't have it with me. I've been traveling, and my documents are in storage. But the account is under Marcus Hayes, and it should have been opened about 15 years ago." 15 years? Gerald let out a short laugh. "Sir, accounts don't just sit dormant for 15 years, especially not without any activity. If you had an account here, it would have been closed years ago for inactivity, and any funds would have been transferred to the state as unclaimed property." "I made arrangements before I left," Marcus said calmly. "The account was structured specifically to remain active during my absence." Gerald's expression hardened. "Look, Mr. Hayes, I don't know what you think is here, but I've been managing this branch for 8 years, and I know our client base. Our clients are professionals, business owners, People of substantial means. They don't show up in wet clothes looking like they've been sleeping on park benches. His voice had risen slightly, and a few nearby customers glanced over. Marcus remained perfectly still. I understand how this looks, Mr. Blackwood, but appearances can be deceiving. I'm simply asking you to check your records more thoroughly. I don't need to check anything further. I think what's happening here is very clear. You probably had a basic checking account years ago. It was closed. And now you're back hoping to cause some trouble or get some kind of payout. Well, that's not how we operate here. Gerald gestured toward the door. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. If you genuinely had an account here, you can contact our customer service line, and they can help you track down any unclaimed funds through the proper channels. But I won't have you taking up our time and making our actual clients uncomfortable. The lobby had grown quiet. Other customers were openly watching now, some with sympathy in their eyes, others with the same disdain Gerald wore. The security guard had moved closer. Marcus took a slow breath. Mr. Blackwood, I'm asking you one more time. Please check your records for Marcus Hayes. There should be a flag on the account. A special designation. There's nothing to check. I'm done entertaining this. Gerald turned to the security guard. Tom, please escort this gentleman out. As the guard approached, his hand hovering near Marcus's elbow but not quite touching, the older man reached into his backpack. The guard tensed, but Marcus simply pulled out a worn leather wallet. From it, he extracted a card, slightly bent from years in his pocket, and held it out to Gerald. Before I go, you might want to look at this. Gerald snatched the card impatiently, ready to dismiss it as quickly as everything else. But as his eyes focused on what he was holding, the color drained from his face. It was a platinum banking card, but not just any card. The design was one he'd only seen in internal memos, in the exclusive client portfolios he'd studied when he first became a manager but never actually encountered in person. It was a Centurion Elite card, the kind issued to only a handful of the bank's most significant clients, people whose accounts held not millions, but hundreds of millions. Sometimes billions. Gerald's hand trembled slightly as he flipped the card over. The name embossed on the back read, Marcus J. Hayes, account priority level, Omega. This, Gerald stammered, his professional composure crumbling. Sir, where did you get this? I didn't get it anywhere, Mr. Blackwood. It was issued to me by this very bank 15 years ago, when I established a private wealth management account with your institution. Marcus's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the quiet words. Gerald's mind raced. Omega-level clients were legendary within the bank, whispered about in break rooms and training sessions. They were the clients who received personal calls from the CEO, who had entire teams dedicated to managing their portfolios, whose accounts were so significant they could affect the bank's quarterly reports. He'd never actually seen an Omega designation in his 8 years here. Most managers never did in their entire careers. I need to... Please, wait just one moment. Gerald practically ran to the nearest computer terminal, the card still clutched in his shaking hand. He logged in with his manager credentials, then accessed the high-priority client database, a section of the system he rarely had reason to enter. He typed in the name, Marcus J. Hayes. What appeared on the screen made his stomach drop through the floor. The account not only existed, but it was flagged with more security protocols and special instructions than Gerald had ever seen. The balance was partially obscured, showing only the first few digits, but those digits alone were enough, $847,000. And the number continued. Behind that were investment portfolios, property holdings, bonds and assets that extended across multiple pages. There were notes from previous senior management, instructions about privacy, protocols for when Mr. Hayes returned from his extended travels abroad. But what made Gerald's blood run cold was the note at the top of the file, dated just 2 years ago, from the bank's CEO himself. Mr. Hayes's anonymity and privacy are to be protected at all costs. He is engaged in important humanitarian work abroad and has requested minimal contact. When he returns, he is to be afforded every courtesy and assistance. His contributions to this institution have been invaluable, and his trust in us is not something we take lightly. Gerald clicked through more files, his horror growing with each page. Marcus Hayes wasn't just wealthy. He was a tech entrepreneur who had pioneered software systems now used by banks worldwide, including this one. He'd sold his company 15 years ago for an amount that had made headlines, then quietly disappeared from public life. Articles from financial magazines showed a younger, clean-cut Marcus in expensive suits, shaking hands with presidents and CEOs. But even then, the articles noted his discomfort with the spotlight, his desire to use his wealth for something meaningful. There were internal bank memos about his instructions. The money was to be invested conservatively, with a significant portion directed toward charitable trusts he'd established for education in developing countries, medical research, and disaster relief. He'd left instructions that he was embarking on a personal journey, wanting to see the world as a regular person, to understand life outside the bubble his wealth had created. He'd requested that the bank maintain his accounts, but otherwise leave him alone unless he initiated contact, and Gerald had just thrown him out. The senior manager stood frozen at the terminal, the busy sounds of the bank fading into white noise. His career flashed before his eyes. The promotions he'd worked so hard for, the respect he'd built, the future he'd planned, all of it was crumbling. You didn't humiliate an Omega-level client. You certainly didn't have one escorted out by security while other customers watched. He turned back toward the lobby, but Marcus was already gone, the security guard standing awkwardly by the door, clearly confused by what had just transpired. The receptionist was watching Gerald with wide eyes, sensing that something had gone terribly wrong. Gerald rushed outside into the rain, his expensive suit immediately soaking through. He looked left and right, spotting Marcus about half a block away, walking calmly through the storm without even bothering to hurry. "Mr. Hayes!" Gerald called out, running after him, his polished shoes splashing through puddles. "Mr. Hayes, please wait!" Marcus stopped and turned slowly. The rain ran down his face, but his expression was unreadable. Gerald reached him, breathless and drenched. "Sir, I cannot begin to apologize. I made a terrible mistake. I should have listened. I should have checked more thoroughly. Please come back inside. We can get you dry, and I can personally handle everything you need. Anything you need." "Can you?" Marcus asked quietly. "Can you undo what just happened? Can you erase the last 30 minutes? "No, sir. I can't. But I can make this right. Please, I'm begging you." Marcus studied him for a long moment, the rain continuing to fall around them. "Tell me something, Mr. Blackwood. What did you see when you first looked at me?" Gerald swallowed hard. I made assumptions based on your appearance. I judged you without knowing anything about you. And how many people do you think you've treated that way? How many others have you dismissed, looked down on, made feel small because they didn't meet your expectations of what wealth or importance looks like? The question hung in the air. Gerald wanted to defend himself, to explain that he was just protecting the bank, maintaining standards, but the words died in his throat because he knew the truth. This wasn't the first time. It wouldn't have been the last. He'd spent years equating someone's worth with their appearance, their clothes, the car they drove. He'd built his entire professional identity around serving the wealthy and powerful, but he'd never stopped to consider that wealth and power could wear many faces, that sometimes the most important people were the ones who chose not to advertise it. "I don't know," Gerald finally admitted, his voice barely audible over the rain. "Too many, probably." Marcus nodded slowly. "For the past 7 years, I've been traveling through Asia, Africa, South America. I've built schools in villages you've never heard of. I've worked alongside doctors in refugee camps. I've sat with families who have nothing but still offered to share their meals with me. I've seen poverty that would break your heart, and I've seen generosity that would restore your faith in humanity." He paused, his eyes never leaving Gerald's. "I came back because I need to access my resources to expand that work, but I also came back to see if I'd changed, or if the world had changed. And what I found in that bank was the same thing I left behind. People so focused on the surface that they forgot to look deeper." "You're right," Gerald said, and he meant it. The rain was cold, his suit was ruined, and his career might be over. But in this moment, standing on a Manhattan sidewalk being lectured by a man he'd wronged, Gerald felt something he hadn't felt in years, genuine shame, and with it, the possibility of genuine change. "You're absolutely right. What I did was inexcusable, not just because of who you are, but because of how I treated you as a human being. Any human being. Do you understand why it was wrong, Mr. Blackwood? Not because I'm wealthy, but because you didn't afford me basic dignity and respect. The same respect every person who walks into that bank deserves, regardless of their account balance. I do understand. I do." Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said, "I'm going to come back tomorrow. When I do, I want you to treat me exactly the way you would have today, based on how I look. I want to see if anything has changed." Gerald's heart sank. "Sir, I promise you, if you come back tomorrow—" "I don't want promises," Marcus interrupted. "I want to see if this moment meant anything, or if you'll just go back to business as usual once I'm out of sight. I'll be there at 10 o'clock, and Mr. Blackwood, I'll be dressed exactly like this." With that, Marcus turned and walked away, disappearing into the rain and the crowd of umbrellas. Gerald stood there for several minutes, oblivious to the cold water soaking through his clothes, the strange looks from passers-by. Then, Slowly, he walked back to the bank. The rest of the day was a blur. Gerald barely functioned, mechanically going through his tasks while his mind replayed the encounter over and over. He couldn't eat lunch. He couldn't focus on the reports on his desk. He jumped every time his phone rang, expecting it to be the regional director or even the CEO calling to fire him, but the call never came. Marcus hadn't reported him yet. That evening, Gerald sat in his expensive apartment overlooking the city, a glass of scotch untouched on the table beside him. His wife, Catherine, sat across from him, listening as he recounted the entire story. "My God, Gerald," she said when he finished. "You could lose everything. I know. What are you going to do?" He looked at her, this woman who had stood by him through his climb up the corporate ladder, who had celebrated every promotion, every success. "I don't know if there's anything I can do. He's coming back tomorrow. He wants to see if I've changed." Can you? Can you change in one day? Gerald thought about that. Could he? Could anyone? Or was he so deeply ingrained in his prejudices, his assumptions, his carefully constructed worldview, that one humiliating encounter wouldn't make a difference? He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat up reading everything he could find about Marcus Hayes. There wasn't much. The man had been remarkably private even before his disappearance. But what he did find painted a picture of someone extraordinary. A self-made entrepreneur who had grown up in poverty, who had put himself through college working 3 jobs, who had built a revolutionary company from nothing, someone who had given away more money than most people would earn in 100 lifetimes, and who had done it quietly, without press releases or galas or buildings bearing his name. There was one interview, from just before Marcus had left, that made Gerald stop and read twice. The interviewer had asked Marcus what he planned to do with his wealth, and Marcus had said, "I plan to spend it learning what it means to be human again. Wealth creates distance. It insulates you from reality, from struggle, from the experiences that connect us all. I want to strip that away. I want to remember what it feels like to be just another person in the world." The next morning, Gerald arrived at the bank an hour early. He gathered his entire staff, the receptionists, the tellers, the junior associates, the security guards, into the conference room. He told them about Marcus Hayes. He told them about his mistake, and he told them that today they were going to do better. "Today," he said, looking at each person in turn, "we're going to treat every person who walks through that door with the same dignity and respect, regardless of how they look or what we assume about them. Not because we're worried about losing money or getting in trouble, but because it's the right thing to do. It's what we should have been doing all along." The receptionist who had first encountered Marcus spoke up, her voice uncertain. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm sorry. I should have been more helpful yesterday." "We all should have," Gerald said, "but we can start today." At exactly 10 o'clock, the front door opened, and Marcus Hayes walked in. He wore the same worn jacket, the same faded jeans, the same old sneakers. Water droplets clung to his hair from the morning drizzle outside. He looked exactly as he had the day before, but this time, Gerald was there to meet him. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes," Gerald said, his voice respectful but not fawning. "Thank you for coming back. Please let me help you with whatever you need today." Marcus studied him carefully, his eyes searching for something in Gerald's face. Whatever he found must have satisfied him, because he nodded slightly. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood." Gerald personally escorted Marcus to a private office, brought him coffee, and spent the next 2 hours helping him access his accounts, arrange transfers, and set up the infrastructure he needed for his charitable work. They worked efficiently, professionally, but there was something else too, an unspoken understanding, a shared recognition of the lesson learned. When they finished, Marcus stood and extended his hand. Gerald shook it, feeling the calluses on Marcus's palm, the evidence of years of physical work in difficult places. "Thank you for your help today," Marcus said. "Thank you for giving me a second chance," Gerald replied. "Most people wouldn't have. Most people don't need to learn the lessons I needed to learn," Marcus said with a slight smile. "I spent my first 40 years chasing success and wealth. I spent my 50s learning that neither of those things defines a person's worth. You learned that lesson a lot faster than I did." As Marcus turned to leave, Gerald called out to him, "Mr. Hayes, may I ask you something?" "Of course. Why did you come back? You could have gone to any bank in the world, any private wealth manager. Why come back here after what happened?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said, "Because I wanted to see if there was hope. If a person could look past their assumptions when confronted with the truth. If dignity and respect could be restored once they'd been taken away." He paused at the door. "And because I believe people can change, Mr. Blackwood. I've seen it happen in the most unlikely places. I needed to believe it could happen here too." After Marcus left, Gerald stood in the lobby for a long time, watching the people come and go. He saw them differently now, not as account balances or social status markers, but as individuals, each with their own stories, their own journeys, their own inherent worth. The young receptionist approached him hesitantly. "Mr. Blackwood, is everything okay?" He looked at her and smiled, genuinely smiled, for the first time in recent memory. "Yes, Jennifer, everything is going to be okay. Better than okay, actually." In the months that followed, things did change at that branch of First National Bank. Gerald implemented new training programs focused on dignity and respect for all clients. He himself made a point of greeting everyone who came through the door, regardless of their appearance. The staff noticed the shift in him, and slowly it affected them too. He never saw Marcus Hayes again. The wealthy philanthropist closed his accounts 6 months later, transferring everything to a foundation he'd established to continue his humanitarian work. But he left a letter for Gerald, delivered by courier to the bank. It read simply, "Thank you for proving me right about human nature. We're all capable of change when we choose to see beyond the surface. Keep looking deeper, Mr. Blackwood. That's where you'll find what really matters. M.H." Gerald kept that letter in his desk drawer. On difficult days, when the pressure of the job threatened to push him back into old habits, he would take it out and read it. It reminded him that beneath every assumption, every judgment, every superficial assessment, there was a human being deserving of dignity, and that the measure of a person wasn't found in their bank account, their clothes, or their status, but in how they treated others, especially those they perceived to be beneath them. The rain continued to fall on Manhattan, as it always had and always would. But in one small corner of that vast city, in one branch of a prestigious bank, something fundamental had changed, not because of policy or procedure, but because one man had been humbled enough to learn and wise enough to grow from the experience. And sometimes, that's all it takes to make the world a little bit better. One person, one choice, one moment of genuine change at a time.